Hey everyone, I'm your guide, and this is the ninth entry in a series of more than 150 entries where we'll look at the fascinating and often frightening monsters inscribed in our trusty monster manual. In each entry, we'll cover what's in the manual, but also other interesting tidbits I found in my travels. This companion series is meant to educate, entertain, and elevate your excursions into the more dangerous areas of the Forgotten Realms. Everywhere from the cemetery behind your local church to the nine hells and everywhere in between. And even some places much, much more interesting. So come, join me. Let's begin. Here's an excerpt from the tome Creatures of the Wilder Lands by the sage and explorer Radamust. One of the most malevolent creatures I have ever encountered is the Behir. Having nearly fallen victim to its depredations on two separate occasions, I have endeavored to learn more about this wild and curious beast, which is occasionally mistaken for a wingless dragon by the uneducated. But a Behir is unmistakable to the learned, once you've seen it. It's a 12-legged serpent, with each foot bearing 3 toes that end in sharp razor talons. The body is covered in band-like scales from light to dark blue in color, with grayish tints along the edges. The underside is also light blue and composed of a vertical row of banded scales. These scales are quite hard and tough and can actually be made into serviceable armor by a competent blacksmith. The head is long and the narrow mouth filled with many sharp teeth, and 2 backward curving horns project from the rear of the skull, each black in color and 4 feet in length. Though massive and bulky creatures, Behir are surprisingly quick and nimble, capable of overtaking human prey. They also climb remarkably well and can move straight up the face of a cliffside. When fully grown, Behir often measure as much as 40 feet in length, though being reptilian they never actually stop growing. While there are rare versions of the Behir that exist within desert and jungle climates, the vast majority of Behir reside in mountainous and hilly terrain, or perhaps open plains and temperate forests. However, they're not known to remain in the same spot for too long, so you won't find a Behir's lair the same way you might find a dragon's. Their lairs are usually found in places inaccessible to other creatures, favoring locations where would-be intruders have to make a harrowing climb to reach them. Deep pits, high caves and cliff walls, and caverns are all prime examples of ideal Behir lairs. Behir are mainly active during the day and sleep during the moonlit hours, but not exclusively. They prey on all creatures smaller than them, particularly mammals such as boars, though they will also attack humans, ogres, and elves. Also, being reptilian in nature, Behir swallow their prey whole and spend several days recovering after eating. And common Behir hibernate during the winter and spend much of their time fattening up before its onset. Speaking of, Behir are surprisingly cunning and are quite adept at acquiring prey by conventional means. While only dimly intelligent compared to humans, they prefer to attack from ambush and openly confront only small groups of creatures, always making sure they have the upper hand. Sometimes they might even work as a pair where one flushes out the prey into the waiting claws of the other. But I will note this seems to be the exception to the rule. Once the Behir has its prey in front of it, it can attack in numerous ways, typically by rearing up on the back 8 legs and clawing using its front 4 legs. It's also known to kind of wrap its upper body around larger victims and crush them. And less commonly, a Behir might ram a foe with its forehead or trample it underfoot. Once their prey has been sufficiently beaten, the Behir will go on to swallow their prey whole. And once swallowed, there's almost no chance of the prey escaping alive. The digestive juices are strong enough to corrode and dissolve flesh in just a few hours, and metal in a few days. Needless to say, I haven't exactly heard of anyone returning after being swallowed alive by a Behir. However, I will note that the stomach acid is not strong enough to dissolve gems or glass, so you might even find these in the stomach of a slain Behir if you're lucky enough. So while we're talking about how Behirs tend to attack, I'd be crazy not to mention how Behirs can generate a bolt of lightning from their mouth in a similar way to blue dragons. This bolt is roughly 7 yards long and is issued directly from the mouth of the Behir. I've read that the Behir has an internal organ with an unusually high concentration of metals adjacent to its stomach. This organ is connected by a nerve system to another highly metallic organ in the back of the Behir's mouth, and it's believed that this is how the Behirs generate the aforementioned lightning bolt. What is known for sure though is that the Behir has complete control over this and can discharge it as often as 6 times per hour. But if you do find yourself in combat with a Behir, I've read that because of their reptilian nature, they become quite sluggish when temperatures fall below the freezing point, so usage of cold producing spells very well could save your life. So in regards to reproduction, Behirs grow steadily and are able to mate by their 10th year, at which point we consider them adults. Mating takes place in the early spring, with the pair choosing a secluded cave in which to live during this time. Afterwards, the female lays up to 4 eggs, blue-green in color and about 2 feet long. The eggs are leathery like a snake's and they're buried under a light layer of sand or dirt. After about 3 to 4 weeks, the eggs hatch and the young are quickly driven from the lair and must fend for themselves. Very few survive to adulthood, as many succumb to any number of other monsters and foes, not least of which being adventurers like yourself. But now let's touch on where Behirs came from historically. Well, according to our monster manual, in times long forgotten, giants and dragons engaged in seemingly endless war. Storm giants then created the very first Behirs as weapons against the dragons, which explains the enduring natural hatred Behirs have for anything dragon-kind or dragon-adjacent. But that's essentially the extent of our knowledge regarding the historical lore of Behirs. These malevolent creatures have somehow kept their history somewhat under wraps for all this time. But I'd be willing to bet the truth exists somewhere out there, perhaps only known to giants or dragonkind. Okay guys, that'll do it for today's entry on the Behir, a rather fascinating creature if I do say so myself. But at 40 feet in length and 4,000 pounds, I think I'd rather stay in the city instead of risking an encounter with one of these creatures. I'll leave that sort of thing up to you adventurers. So if you turn the page in the monster manual, you'll see our next entry is the Beholder. This one has quite a lot to look through, so we'll see how long this one ends up being. But for now, this is your guide signing out. Be safe, take care, and happy trails.